And we are live. This is BC Simon with a new series called Meet Your Child's Author. And we are with a very special guest today. Today we have Mr. J, the author of Ricky the Rock That Couldn't Roll. And he's featured in just about everywhere and anywhere. We'll get into that. And I want to introduce you as someone that is so important to the indie author community, someone that has a massive group with so many people involved in your project to promote writers that are not necessarily signed by uh, companies at this point. Jay, it's so nice to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and chat with you.
So I want to start with you are a very innovative guy, but you have an economics background. So I want to really dig into what got you into writing to begin.
I've always, I've always enjoyed writing. When I was in school, that was my favorite subject, and when I was in, elementary school and high school, I always enjoyed writing more than any other subjects. And when I was in college, I was an economics major, and I always thought that I wanted to get into investment banking and things of that nature, and more for fun, just because I enjoyed them. I started taking a lot of, writing and literature classes, and as it turned out, when I was a junior, I looked at the book, and I just happened to notice that I was like three credits shy of being a creative writing minor, without even having realized I took all those credits. So I just decided to focus on that as a minor, um, just more because I enjoyed it more than anything else. When I graduated college, I started my own marketing agency, and back then, and I'm aging myself here a little bit, but Photoshop was at Photoshop 2.0, so it was completely brand new, and most advertising agencies were still working off of drafting tables and actual hand drawn art. So I got into it, and I started to learn how to use a computer, because I had never even, at that point, I had never even seen a color monitor before. That's kind of like when all this was happening, and my printer told me, if you really want to do marketing, you should learn how to use a program called Photoshop. So I learned how to use it, and it's not an easy program, as most people know, but for some reason I just picked up on it pretty quickly, and I took a test, and I ended up becoming an Adobe certified Photoshop expert, one of the first to kind of have that designation in the country. And I started getting a little bit of press and people noticing the work that I was doing. And one day I just got a phone call from an acquisitions editor over at Prentice Hall, or Pearson Education. And they said, "Hey, listen, we've been kind of following your work. Would you be interested in writing a book for us on how to use Photoshop?" And I had never really thought of writing a book before. And I thought, okay, this is a major publisher coming to me. I don't have to go and try to find an agent or pitch them anything. I was able to kind of call my own shots with it a little bit, because there wasn't that many people who knew Photoshop on a level that I understood it. And I said, yeah, look, I'll be happy to do it, but you can edit me, from a text standpoint. You can edit my grammar. You just can't edit my voice, because I do enjoy writing, and I think that I'm pretty good at it. So, they agreed to that, and I ended up writing three books for Pearson. As a traditional publisher. And then my acquisitions editor left and went to Cengage, Learning. And Cengage is a division of Thomson Reuters, at least it used to be when I was writing for them. And she said, "Look, I'd like you to continue writing for us." And by this time, my agency that I had started was quite a bit bigger. And I said, I'd be happy to write for Cengage, but I don't want to write books on graphic design anymore. Now I want to write books on marketing and advertising and brand building. So I ended up writing eight more through Cengage, that range in topics from entrepreneurship to marketing, and including two college textbooks on online marketing. And I really enjoyed it. But at some point, you're writing a 400-page book every 6 months, and and meanwhile you're also running your own life and your business and whatever, and it got tiring, and I got to a point where I was just burned out from it. I couldn't do it anymore. So I took a long break, and then I had my daughter, and I read books to my daughter every night before bed. And she was, my book had my daughter has cerebral palsy, so she can't walk or talk, even though now she'll be almost 9 next week. And when she was about 3 years old, I started thinking, I just out of curiosity, what books are out there for and about kids with disabilities. And what I found were books that were just very depressing to me. They were all about kids with disabilities having a wonderful life in their imagination. And I'm like, I don't want my kid to have a wonderful life in her imagination. I want her to have a great life, period. So I just wanted to write a book that was more hopeful. And so I went about writing Ricky the Rock That Couldn't Roll. And I recognized that, from my marketing background, I knew that if I wanted to have a book that had a lot of sales, it had to appeal to a broad audience. So I couldn't have a character on the cover in a wheelchair or in a gait trainer because no one would buy that book. So I wrote it as a metaphor. And most people never know that that's what Ricky's Rock is about. Most people just think it's about friendship and perseverance, and that's it. And they don't realize that Ricky is actually a metaphor for a child that has got cerebral palsy, and that all the rocks around him trying to help are metaphors for the teachers and the doctors and nurses and aides that help her and help these kids every single day. Um,
Wow.
so that was it. I ended up, I had an opportunity to publish that book through a major publisher through Scholastic, and I decided at the last minute that I didn't want to go that route. Instead, I decided to self-publish because I recognized that I could do much better financially, and I can get it done a lot faster um, if I did it on my own. And so that's what I did. And since then, I've written 8 more books with 6 more on the way for the next couple of years.
My goodness. And there are so many questions that I've got just off that. But I think the first one is probably when you made that transition from a writer in the academic community to someone that is writing out of almost a compassionate approach, but also uh, frustration. Was there a motivation for you to basically educate your child in a way that wasn't going to be like dad's educating you?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think the Ricky wasn't really for my daughter so much. It might have been about her, but it was really more because I've always taken a very positive approach to my daughter's disability, and I've always believed that if we continue to try to find ways to make progress, that one day she will walk by herself and she will learn some words and be able to have a conversation with me. And maybe she will, maybe she won't, but it's something that I believe in, and I want her to just have a happy life, and if she can live a happy life, then that's great. And so I've always had a very positive approach to her and her capabilities and the thing and her challenges. But as knowing having her in her a school for kids with CP, I've gotten to know other parents. I've gotten through different doctors and whatever else, and I know that there are a lot of parents who struggle to have a positive outlook for their kids when these kids have such severe disabilities, and they have a hard time seeing any silver lining and any positivity. So Ricky was really more of a letter to those parents, to and those families, to let them know, listen, don't give up. You're going to try some therapies, and some of them are going to work, and some of them aren't going to work, but some of them will. And maybe they might not. These kids might not necessarily go on to lead the lives that we have always wanted them to lead, but there can be happiness. There can be a lot of joy and a lot of love and a lot of everything that you could want in a family. um and just don't despair, don't give up. Because there's always something down the road that's going to be more positive than what we are experiencing now, as long as you keep on trying. So it wasn't necessarily to teach my daughter anything. It was more something for other families who might need a little bit of hope to lean on.
And in doing that, was that also therapeutic for yourself to to write a book about a rock that tries people try to get this rock to roll, this rock named Ricky to roll, and there's many different attempts with different I'm assuming analogies for each step.
Well, in the book, when Ricky can't roll because he's flat on one side, and the other rocks who are all around and they can roll, they all try different things, and one thing after another doesn't work until they finally find something that does. And the one thing that does is they put him on his head, and they put mold on the flat side, and they shape it and sculpt it, um, and then they tie it all together with vines when it hardens. So that basically becomes kind of like an analogy for a prosthetic or a gait trainer or a wheelchair, whatever you want it to be a metaphor for. But um I wouldn't, I think I'm supposed to say that it was cathartic to me, but I don't really feel like I needed to have any release. I mean, like I said, I've never really felt other than the 3 months when she was in the hospital, when she was born, and especially those first few days when she had her brain injury, I never really felt any despair or any kind of negativity. So I I know that there are a lot of people who do write these kind of books as an emotional release, and I think you can kind of tell. Like there was a one of the books that kind of got me a little annoyed before I wrote Ricky was a book called Princess something, Princess Penelope or something of palsy, whatever it was. And the idea was that there was this girl who had cerebral palsy, and she was a princess of an actual land called Palsy. And in her imagination, she could be, she was princess there and could do everything she wanted. And it was just a horrifying book to me. Um, it was just a miserable, terrible title for a book. It was cringeworthy. I understand where the author was coming from. I understand that she was probably looking for some sort of emotional release, and she was looking for some sort of cathartic experience where she could put her feelings down on paper. Um, and I get that, but I also think at the same time, while she was probably helping herself, she may have actually been damaging other people who would read that book and who had kids like that, and who then had to maybe believe that, oh my God, my kid can only be happy in her imagination, and that sucks. So I wouldn't say that it was any kind of cathartic sort of thing for me. I just think it was something that I felt like I had a unique perspective on my daughter's disability that a lot of parents didn't seem to share, and I was just trying to share that with them. And at the same
That's
time, also make a
incredible.
book that kids and parents and teachers would enjoy reading. So if you didn't know that's what it was about, then who cares? It's still a fun book.
Yeah, and when I read it, I thought this book is encouraging communities of people to rally around the people that need support and to not give up on finding solutions. So to hear the actual background and story on what it was that led to you writing this book, it tells me that just like you were saying, adults can interpret things in a way that is relative to them, which doesn't just make it a children's book, and that sounds silly in a way.
No, I think you're right though. These for the most part, these books are going to be read to kids by adults, whether it's by a teacher or by a parent, and so the parents and teachers have to walk away with something also, whether it's just pure entertainment or a message that resonates with them, and however it is they're going to interpret it. Um, and I go to a school sometimes, or before COVID, we would do the live assemblies, and I would stand on the stage in the Kappa Gymatorium, and I would talk to 600 kids, and we'd read Ricky, and I would ask everybody, so what is Ricky about? And all the hands would go up, and I'd choose some kid, and it's about being a good friend, and sure, it is, and that's actually what it is. It's all the rocks are being a really good friend to Ricky, and they're being kind to him, and they're accepting him, and they're helping him. What else is it about? All the hands go up again. It's about never giving up. Absolutely. So let's we talk about that. Then I'll ask one more time, what else is Ricky about? And at that point, all the hands go down, and no one really knows, except for maybe one or two kids somewhere in the middle who'll have their hands up, and I'll call on one, and that kid will say, "Does Ricky have a disability?" And you dig a little bit deeper, and you find out that that kid has a brother or a sister who has cerebral palsy, or something is wrong. And yes, Ricky does. Let's chat about that. But it doesn't have to be that if you don't want it to be. Ricky was written very specifically to appeal to the widest possible audience because it's got a lot of messages that have absolutely nothing to do with a disability. But if you are a parent who is in that community, holy shit, this really, this really speaks to me. I get what this is about. I have another book out there with the same rock characters called "Do Pebbles Eat Chili," and it's more of a collection of one page lyrical stories. And the very last one, it's like 45 of them or so. And the last one actually is a very short little poem that it tells you exactly what Ricky's about. Because I've had so many people who've emailed me asking me, this book is clearly about friendship and perseverance, but it feels like there was something else that it's about. And they've asked me what it is. So I just kind of wrote to everyone in my last book, here's what it's about.
That's remarkable. And what I really love about your angle is a lot of people write books because they want to be a famous writer or because they want to be a writer in general. And it seems as if for you, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I would like you to elaborate, is you write because you want to see the world change for ways that you feel it needs to or should.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's a little bit of everything. I'm not going to say that I don't enjoy, exposure. And I do enjoy. There are times actually where I will walk into a store, and I've had people recognize me from either because I've spoken at their kid's school or, my pictures on the back of their book. I've walked in. I've been in airports before, and I've looked over at another gate while people are waiting for a plane, and there's a little kid with Ricky or one of my books, and like, holy crap, that's awesome. And that's really cool. I love that. I am, I'm the Bon Jovi of the under 6-year-old set, and that's kind of fun. I walk into a school, and these kids are like, "Oh my god, it's the author of my favorite book," and that's fun. That's I'm not going to say that's not an enjoyable thing, and that I don't, I don't like that. I do, and I would like to be better known, and I'm hoping but I want to be known for the right thing. I want to be known for writing books that are not only superbly written and beautifully illustrated, but that also have morals and lessons that are important. And I do think there's a lot of room for books that are just silly and they're just fun to read. But I think that there's also room for books that are fun to read and character driven and plot driven, but that also have messages out there that are going to benefit people. And I'm not a world savior. I'm not here. I'm not going to be the guy who's going to go out and save the environment or save the dolphins and that kind of stuff. I'm probably not equipped to do those things. But there are things that I think are important. For example, I have a book right now that's on Kickstarter that's called "Have You Heard the News?" And the idea behind that book is it's a fun book, character driven, plot driven about a duck who is almost about to ruin a day for a ladybug and frog because the duck just read a headline of a newspaper and didn't read the rest of it, and therefore came to the wrong conclusion about what the news was. And it's the idea is not really to bash the media, but it's the idea is to promote critical thinking. Because I find that as you travel around the country like I do, and you talk to all these kids, you realize a lot of these kids have no ability to critically think anymore. They just
Mhm.
accept what's being told to them and they don't question anything, and that's important to me. I think it's important that we be able to question claims and say, hey, does that actually make sense what I'm being told, or should I look a little bit deeper into it? Should I think for myself as opposed to just regurgitating what's being told to me? Patrick Picklebottom and the Penny Book. That's a book about a love of reading because I feel like I've traveled around the country now and I've talked with a lot of kids and I hear what they have to tell me, and you know if I talk to them about books, I get met with a half-hearted response. If I talk about video games, they're all over it. I had in one school out in Ohio, I believe, I was talking with a bunch of second graders, and we were talking about perseverance. And I asked them to give me examples of things that they've had a hard time doing, and they finally accomplished it after they tried a lot. And you get the typical answers of riding a bike and playing the piano. And one kid raised his hand, and I said, "Yo, how about you?" And he said, "I couldn't score a goal in soccer." Great. So I kept on clicking and clicking and clicking, and I finally did it. And it took me a second. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, clicking. I'm like, "Are you talking about video soccer?" And that's exactly what he's talking about. I'm like, these are beautiful days out. I'm here in the middle of spring. You should be outside playing real soccer, but you're home playing video soccer. And in second grade, that's your biggest claim to fame is that you finally got to score some goals on your video soccer game. So, I wrote Package Pickleball to kind of not to put down electronics or to demonize video games because, I play video games. I use electronics. We're here right now talking on YouTube. You can't say those are bad things. But to also say, hey, listen, that's not all there is. There's, discover books, discover imagination. So I'm not gonna change the world, but maybe if I could influence some people to think a little bit differently and to recognize some things that maybe they've forgotten, then that's a good thing. Along with while I'm growing a company and making a living for myself.
So I love how you approach it with parents being a part of the experience because if you look at children's television and in particular Disney, that's one of their biggest attractive features is that they make it multidimensional. Their work can be related to by children and also adults. I find that when I hear you speak, a lot of the things that you say are directed towards parents that might not have had a good reading background growing up and trying to integrate them into that atmosphere and invite them in so that they can help their child and maybe even for them as well become readers.
Yeah, and I think that is part of it. I think that again, I try to keep in mind that the parents and the teachers are going to be using this as one as a tool just to get their kid to go to sleep or get their kid to settle down for a little bit, but also to also let parents know. I mean, if a parent can read Ricky can read Patrick Picklebottom and walk away thinking, hey, you know what, maybe 10 minutes less of screen time for myself isn't also wouldn't be a bad thing. You know, that's not that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world either. And there are other books out there. I before I wrote Patrick, I looked at some of the other books. There's like one by Jamie Lee Curtis, I believe, and she wrote a book that's about about that same sort of thing, but she took an approach of, and I think Tiffany Amber Thiessen, the girl who played Kelly on Saved by the Bell, she wrote also a book about that. But they both took this route of kind of putting parents down for looking at their phone too much. I mean, on every page you see the kids trying to get the parents' attention, and the parents are looking at their phone. Well, as a parent, I don't want to read a book to my kid that's going to make me look like an ass. I mean, who wants that? I'm not looking for my kid the next day say to me, "Hey, Dad, put your phone down. You just read this book." Okay, I'm not looking for that. So aren't there ways that we can be a little more clever and get a point across so that you're not making anyone look stupid, um, and the parents can then walk away with a lesson as well, or at least a different way of looking at things. I'm this book, have you heard the news? Is not going to be my last. It won't be my last on critical thinking. Because I think a lot of parents have also lost the ability to think critically. I think that they have, we've all started to become a little stupefied by all the screens around us and, the 24-hour news cycle and just accepting what we were told because, we don't either don't have the time or the inclination to research further. So I think that, I like to think that my books more are a little more like they can appeal to a more highly educated individual as well, and kids can also enjoy them at the same time.
Yeah, and I think when I look at you said that you turned down an offer from Scholastic initially, and the on your first book, and I see the reason being is because you believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that your books are a representation of yourself, and it's something that you want to be part of in the whole totality of it.
That's actually a much better answer than my actual answer. My actual answer is I just recognize I can make a ton more money doing it on my own if I did it through them. The reality is that when you're working through a traditional publisher, I don't love the fact that they own the rights to everything and that they choose the illustrator and they choose the size of the book and it could be they can make it however many pages they want. They can truncate things and they have all that control. But the reality is that I then make a relatively small advance against a relatively small percentage royalty, and that royalty is taken off the wholesale price. So you're looking at, long story short, I'd be looking at like 40 cents per book. And it could be years before the book actually ends up being produced and being on shelves. And I did some math myself real quick, and I understood international shipping and I understood marketing, and I started to recognize, if I do this on my own, I could walk away with $4 to $5 per book as opposed to 40 cents per book. Um, and why not? Wouldn't I, if I, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. I never had a 9 to 5 job. I've always owned my own companies in a variety of different industries, and so I'm not afraid of I'm not afraid of taking a risk. I'm not afraid of making an investment. And I thought, would I rather be the author or rather be the publisher? And then I realized pretty quickly I'd rather be the publisher. They're going to make out a lot better than I am. The only difference between them and me is that they're taking the risk and putting the money behind it. Um, I don't mind taking a risk. So, I just kind of I said thank you, but no thank you to them because I decided to, I realized I can make a lot more money being my own publisher.
And that's like the e- perfect example for someone putting their money where their mouth is. It's like you made a product and you're like, I stand by this product and I'm gonna front whatever it is, 10,000, $20,000. It must have been an expensive venture, and for someone to put that out in a market that isn't established for, especially at that time, indie authors. I'm curious how you feel about the risk you took and what you thought the odds of it not paying off were.
I've always had I've always had businesses. Some have done better than others. Most have succeeded. We always know there's going to be a chance that is not going to happen. Like most entrepreneurs, or at least people who've made a career out of being entrepreneurs, I don't go it completely alone. The first thing I did was I did a lot of research into the industry. I made sure I understood all the numbers, which I think a lot of people who don't succeed in publishing, they get very enamored. Excuse me, they get very enamored with their own story, and once they think of a story, they put it down on paper as quickly as possible, and they just want to get it to market because they feel like this is the most important story ever written. Everyone needs to read about what the cute thing my dog did yesterday. And if I don't put it out there now, someone else is going to come up with the same exact story or going to steal mine, and I need to do it very, very fast. I never approached like that. I understood that in order to make money here, I needed to have a line item of all the different costs and all the expenses, all the revenue that was possible, the cash flow that I'd be seeing, um, how I could get the books produced. I researched all the different avenues for producing books at different levels, and once I had all that in hand, then I did a Kickstarter for a small amount. I also went to investors, and not these aren't big institutional investors. We're talking about selling a percent of a company for a few grand. And everybody knows someone who can invest a couple of $1,000s into your venture for a percent or two. So I realized that in order to do this the right way, I wanted to have an initial print run of 3,500 units, and that would cost me however much dollars, and I need to have more money on top of that because I realized I'd have to go back to print long before I sold out of that first print run, if they were selling. And that's kind of what happened. I raised the money in advance. I made sure that I had all that taken care of, and I took it one step at a time. And I got the books out there when the books were ready to be out there, and not because I felt that the world needed to read my book right now. So I made sure that that it wasn't the first draft of my book. It was horrible, and I didn't even realize that. I thought my first book was great. The first draft was great, and then I showed it to friends and family, and everyone said they loved it. It was great. Not realizing then they were saying that because they lied to me because they didn't want to hurt my feelings. And I finally showed it to someone who didn't really care so much about my feelings and said, "This is horrible, Jay. You can't put money into this." And that was the kindest thing they could have done. All the other people actually were kind of less kind because they were ready to let me invest money into something that was not going to be sellable. This other person who kind of hurt my feelings, I look back, later on, I realized this is the kindest thing that any one of them had done because they told me the truth about it. And it might have hurt, might have stung, but a couple weeks later, I looked at it again with fresh eyes and I said, you know what? They're right. This is not a good product. I wouldn't put if I was manufacturing toasters, I wouldn't put a toaster at the market that was going to, you know, fall apart after 3 uses or that was going to randomly explode when you plug it in. I want to make sure that I'm making the best possible toaster. Books are no different. Books might be more personal to us because they're coming from our experiences, but they are still a commodity. These are still products. I'm not going to put a book out there unless I believe in every way, whether it's from a production standpoint, an illustration standpoint, a writing standpoint, story, characters, that it can compete with the best books that are out there on the market right now. So, I made sure that the product was as high quality as possible. I made sure that if I wasn't going to have the distribution that Scholastic was going to have, that I kept my costs as low as I possibly could, so that I would have additional margin in there, so I could market the book more aggressively, so I could sell more units alternate ways outside of Barnes and Noble and outside of Target and whatever else. So I approached it like I approach a business. I raise the funds, I get my numbers together first, I make a marketing plan and a production plan, and go forward that way. That's what a good CEO and a good entrepreneur does.
So in your first months, or I'm not sure how long it took, were you working full time at start?
So I when I first started this, and it took, I would say, from the time that I wrote the first word to the time that I actually got the books to the printer, it was about 9 months, before I got the first files for Ricky to the printer, because I had no, I'm sorry, it was probably closer to a year, because I it took me about 6 months to write the book. Um, and through all the different drafts I did, and it took an illustrator about 6 months to do the illustration. So it was about a year. In the meantime, I had had another company. I had a company in Manhattan called Sequel Media, and that was we had a number of different websites at the time. The one that we most focused on was a horrible little site called puckermob.com. And it's still around today. We sold the site off to a company, which sold it off to some other company, and that actually kind of also in a weird way kind of pushed me towards wanting to do book writing and write about something that I care about, because that was 40 articles a day of pure dreck. I mean, it's just one terrible article after another, geared towards millennial females. All 40 articles every day said the exact same thing. You were right, he was wrong. You're great, he's a jerk. He never deserved you to begin with. And 20-year-old girls at the time, they ate it up and they shared it nonstop. So we would get 10 to 12 million visits per month. But you reach a point where, like, you can't just keep putting this horrible content out into the world, um, and just trying to write one more clickbait headline for the hope of selling five more ad spaces. It wasn't a fun thing to do. And then I started to think about Ricky, and I started to think about ways that I can write a book for and about kids with disabilities without writing it for and about kids with disabilities. And I started to realize I've got an opportunity here to create something that is not that's not Drek, that actually is fun to write, and that can benefit people. So it wasn't long after Ricky was out that I finally said, you know what, I'm going to sell my site, get rid of Sequel Media, and focus almost full time at the time on book writing in my publishing company.
I think a big part of what you do for a living is who you are. And it almost seems as if the experience with your daughter has molded you into wanting to be all around a person that is going to be for her. And it seems as if you have chosen a life that is going to benefit her in whatever way that you feel is possible while still providing for all of her needs.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much right. I mean, she's a fun kid. I'm divorced from my from her mom, and I'm remarried now, and I have my daughter 50% of the time. And when she's here, I make sure she has fun. We play games, we do things. I treat her as much like a typical 8-year-old as I can. In many ways, she's eternally 6 months old. And you know but as long as she's happy and she's cared for and she's smiling every day and she gets excited, we'll have dance parties in the house, and we'll find ways for her to do things. I mean, she can't do things that other kids can do, but she can do other things. This weekend we're taking her for a birthday party where we're gonna go bowling, just like any other 9-year-old would have a bowling party. She's gonna have a bowling party. I will find ways to take her skiing and skydiving and whatever it is, because there's nothing that other kids should be able to do that she shouldn't also get to experience. And I write I write the books based on my beliefs about things. Why and what I feel is important. My book, The Bear and the Fern, is I know there are a lot of people who have kids like Bria, who feel like who feel this desperation because they feel like if my kid doesn't reach a certain milestone by the time they are 7 or 8 years old, then it's never going to happen. And I never believe that. I've always thought that when things happen, they happen. We keep on trying. And so that book is kind of a letter to those people saying, look, whether these kids, whether your kid walks when he or she is 8 or 80, it doesn't make a difference. Just keep on trying. It's never too late.
There's, I worked in mental health for many years and with children that have all sorts of disabilities in the school systems. And I think the parents that showed compassion, care, love, daily nourishment, developing their brains, even if they can't see it right away, something along the way at some point, and it could be the smallest things, clicks with those kids, and you get to see something new. And I almost feel as if that took over your world, those new things, and aspiring to maybe see that growth.
Oh, for sure. I mean, she's. It's if there's anything that I can say about my daughter is that she's very emotionally intelligent, and she'll feed off of other people's emotions. And and if I'm anxious about her future, if I'm feeling afraid of something or worried or sad, I mean, she's gonna recognize that. So and that's those emotions. While while we're human, we're not robots, we have those emotions. They don't really get us very far. Me feeling worried for her doesn't get me very far, as opposed to feeling positive and just let's just keep on trying things. And when things work, they work, and they don't, and that's okay. We'll just keep on plugging forward, and that's what keeps her happy. And the happier she is, the more progress we'll all make.
That's great. And when you teach at a university, do you have a side of your I guess classes and courses displaying the structured economist, the structured businessman, and then do you also highlight and articulate the importance of Jay the person coming across in your businesses?
They probably would get that from from the presentations that I make. When I teach, whether it's at a school or it's a webinar. When I do a lot of webinars at night. For indie authors, teaching them how to do, um, how to publish for profit, how to do Kickstarter campaigns, how to write and rhyme correctly, any number of different topics. And I start every course off, again, whether it's live or on video, the same way. I tell people, listen, here's the thing. I speak fast, so if you don't understand what I'm saying, let me know, because this is about as slow as it's going to get. And I'll try to slow it down further, but I can't promise. And the other thing I tell them is I'm going to curse a lot. I will go off on a tangent on something and I'm passionate about. I'm going to start to wax poetic. Next thing you know, I'm going to drop a couple f bombs. It's going to happen. I don't really like to pretend things. I don't pretend. I don't. If someone asks me an opinion about something, whether it's a business they're going to start or a book they're going to write, don't expect me to tell you it's going to be good if I don't think it's good. I'm going to tell you if it sucks. I'm going to tell you it sucks. I'm I don't sugarcoat. I don't I don't try to soften any blows. I just tell people the way it is. I don't have a lot of energy or um, sympathy for people who pretend that they want to achieve things, but then seem to, but then at the same time are on level 4,700 of Candy Crush, and but they don't have, I don't have time for my book, but then here you are, you're knee deep in playing Fortnite and whatever. It's one or the other. Don't say you can't afford to publish your book, but somehow you're also affording a $6.50 latte over at Starbucks once a day, because those things add up when you can make your own coffee. I don't have sympathy for that kind of stuff. So I mean, I think that my desire to create things that are very high quality, I think that comes through. Um, my desire to do things that are beneficial to other people comes through. But I also make it clear that the benefiting other people is a means to an end, and the end is I'm an entrepreneur. And you mentioned before that I have an economics background. I enjoy building businesses. This is the reason why I enjoy. My last business, when I ran that pucker mop site, I didn't enjoy it because I was making money by putting out a bad product, and it wasn't enjoyable. Now I can make money and I can build a business while putting out a really good product, and that's a win-win. I know I'm not looking to put books out just for the sake of smiley happy faces on a lot of kids, but in order to grow my business, I have to put smiley, happy faces on a lot of kids. And so it's a great avenue towards my end goal, which is to continue to grow as a business person. In the meantime, I'm making a lot of kids happy. I'm making a lot of families and teachers happy. And that's a much better path for me.
I
I think that
see
comes across.
that when people post their books, especially in your groups, people are expecting 100% positivity and great responses. And I'm wondering, what kind of story do you have? I know that you were a professional writer even leading into the children's book world, but did you have any moments where you kind of had to reflect on your own writing to improve it or adjust it, either than that one guy that fed you about The Rock?
Yeah, I think I think that that first time that I wrote that book, and my buddy who told me that it wasn't very good, and I went back and I redid a number of different drafts. I think, like anything, practice is going to make perfect. And back then, it took me 6 months or so to write Ricky the right way. Now I'll write a book in literally a day or two, and I don't even need to have it read. I now I just know it's good or not. I have a panel now of 4 or 5 teachers, um, that I will show new manuscripts to, and I'm not really looking for their feedback on whether it's well written, because I'm confident in that area. Typically, what I look for feedback from them is this something that you would use in your classroom? And 9 out of 10 times they're going to say no, because that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for them to like everything. I'm looking for them to tell me, to be very critical. So that one that they all seem to say, hey, yeah, this is something that we use in our classroom. That's one that I'll invest in. But I think the biggest thing as far as being a writer, and at the same time being a business person, is being able to step away from my work and accept that this is not, whether it's well written or not doesn't make a difference. This is not something that's commercially viable. This might be important to me because it's my story and it's a story that I've experienced and that I have a personal connection to. But that doesn't necessarily, just because I have a personal connection to it, does not make it commercially viable. And I think, again, like I said, if you're manufacturing toasters, you probably don't have that emotional connection to it. You're just looking to make a product. With books, these stories, especially for indie authors, these stories typically come from something in our lives, and so we are very passionate about it. And it's hard to separate yourself from that, and it's hard to step back and say, you know what, okay, I like my story, but that just because I like it does not mean that people want to read it. It's not enough to write what you want to write. You have to write what people want to read. So I think as a writer, my biggest the biggest thing that I had to overcome was a recognition that my story doesn't necessarily mean anything to anyone else.
Oh, uh, can you hear me still?
I can hear you. We just seem to have
Oh,
played a little um switch thing here. You are
yeah,
now on
my
the right at the black screen.
yeah, it looks like I'm black right now. Um, Give me one sec. So I'm going to
While you're
just
fixing
close
that,
this
I'll just
quickly and then
I'll just
open
finish
it.
up with my thoughts. So I would tell any other writers out there, as you're going through the process, to I think anytime someone writes a story, they think that the entire world is going to want to read it, and that the entire world should read it. Um, but that's not necessarily true. You have to recognize who your audience really is and how large the market actually really is, and you have to be able to step away from it and say, hey, you know what, this is not going to work. If it's not going to work, you have to be able to step back from that and recognize it and be okay putting it away. So I think that's kind of that's kind of important. That's the one thing I probably suggest to writers just to getting into book publishing.
And with those teachers that you are speaking with, can you hear
No,
me?
I'm sorry. Now I can't hear you now.
Oh, one sec. Sorry, I'm gonna be off video for now.
Okay.
But
Here
for
you go.
those people that think that they're just gonna write something, uh, I guess they see your finished product, but they don't see what leads to it. And for someone who's already an accomplished writer as yourself, the how many tries do you go through before you end up actually having that book? And do you just scrap ideas if those teachers say, "Yeah, I wouldn't show it"?
Oh yeah, I mean, every book is an investment. You got to put money into printing, into shipping, into illustrating, into marketing it. I'm not going to put a book out there that doesn't have the support from the main group of the main audience that I want, and my main market really is teachers. I want my books to be adopted by as many teachers as possible, because every teacher, you know, if you can get them on your side and you can get them to adopt your book, they're going to read that book to 30 kids. It's a great way to market to those kids. um so yeah, I'll have entire ideas that I have just completely scrapped because it doesn't really appeal to them, even though I think it's a good idea. I have one book, for example, that I didn't listen to anybody, and it was called Beware the Nose Biting Monster, and it was basically a story about a child, a baby, when they first start growing teeth, and how it was basically a story about my daughter when she first started growing teeth. She had this thing where she started biting my nose, and it was very cute. um, and to get her to stop, I would tickle her, and that was our game. And in the end, it was a story about kids that are nonverbal and how these kids will find other ways to communicate with you. But what I didn't realize at the time, and I was and I did have people tell me, don't put this one out because it's not going to work. And I was so enamored with my own story that I insisted on putting on investing in it anyway. And I printed 5,000 books, and it didn't work. And the reason why it didn't work was because if you don't have a kid who bit your nose when they were little, the book doesn't mean anything to you. It's humanoid characters, so you're going to make that personal connection more so than if they were like squirrels or ostriches or hippopotamuses. Um, and it was telling a story about something that happened in my life. And to be honest with you, nobody cares. No one cares of what's going on in my life. That's not why parents want to read books to their kids. To read a book about my experience with my daughter is not something that someone is going to want to read to their kid. So the book was a dismal failure, and I should have known that.
I agree entirely because when my kid, she's 3, she's having a book read. We have hundreds of books. She asks a question about every single page. Why did they do that? What are they doing? How are they going to get out of this? Is this because of this? Do they have a mommy? What's going on? And that would be something tough to explain. Why is the child biting the parent on the nose?
Right.
And it's a tough thing to explain. And that's primarily why I personally wouldn't relate to that. But when you see something like Ricky, it's something that's so logical that they can put it together, but then they can say, well, why is Ricky flat? Well, sometimes people are different than others, and it's just the way they're made. And there's easy explanations for parents. And when I wonder about some of these social uh, justice issues entering the children's book world of late, I'm curious your opinion on that, and do you think there's a place for it?
I'm just not sure. Can you make your point one more time? I'm not actually sure what you're asking.
Oh, so in the children's book world, I'm seeing more and more books that involve adult issues or political being involved in the, I guess, the themes. And do you think that that is something that should be introduced in children's books? And have you noticed that same thing?
I think that people will ride waves. Right now, if you go into a Barnes Noble and you look at the wall, the book walls, you'll see you see that the books are reflective of the things that are very timely. There's a ton of books on kindness. There's a ton of books on race, on racism. There's a ton of books on adversity, diversity, and acceptance, and that's what's out there. And I think those are obviously topics that are just as timely for adults as they are for kids. Um, and I think that when it comes to books that are specifically written, children's books that are specifically written more for an adult audience, I think that once something comes out that works and that's popular, everybody wants to jump on that bandwagon because it's broken that mold. So you look at a story like Go the Fuck to Sleep, which sold like about 10, 12 million copies. And as a children's book, I think Samuel L. Jackson had done a reading of it online, which had gone, quite viral and most people know about it. It's a children's book where the parent is just exasperated because this kid just won't go to sleep. He gets up, wants a glass of water. He wants this. I can't. There's a monster under my bed, and just every line is "Go the fuck to sleep." Um, and it's a hilarious book, and I think a lot of people then after that wanted to do something similar, and they wanted to write a children's book more for adults. Whether or not I don't know that I would actually call that a children's book though. I would call that more of a novelty item. And as a novelty item, I think it works. As a children's book, it's not really a children's book. I think there is room in children's books to appeal to adults because again, they're the ones who are reading the stories. And I was watching Sesame Street with my daughter the other day, and there was Ernie was playing hide and go seek with this duck, and the duck was gonna Ernie was going to go hide and the duck was going to go find him. So while the duck was counting, the duck started counting, and Ernie said, "Okay, no peeking, duck." And peking duck, obviously being a food you'd get at at a Chinese restaurant, and he looked at the camera and go, and he laughed like Ernie does. And kids aren't going to get that, but an adult would get that. Any adult that's had Chinese takeout would get that. And I think there's room to put in jokes for adults, and you know um things that adults would get. How political you want to get, I don't know. I suppose there's room for that, but then you also lose a large part of your market, and you also open yourself up to a lot of negative reviews. We are a very review driven industry. You get a lot of, you get a 3-star review on average on Amazon. No one's that book's not going to get any visibility. So you write a book that is very liberal minded, you're going to get a lot of conservatives who give it negative reviews. You write a book that's very conservative minded, you're going to get a lot of liberals giving it negative reviews. Um, you know, do you want to invest in that? I mean, I've had that issue. With my book, Have You Heard the News? I've surprisingly had a little pushback because people have believed it's a conservative book, and that for some reason, I guess conservatives are the only ones who care about a media that goes unchecked. And I've had to kind of switch up my marketing a little bit because of that, to make it clear that this book is not necessarily about the media. The media is more of a vehicle. The book is about encouraging kids to think critically about things, and not necessarily just about the media. So because I wasn't anticipating that this would be a political sort of thing, but it turns out that people do see it that way.
And with cancel culture today, on that note, the idea that people could invest $10 to $15,000 becoming a reality, and that possibility being the outcome, which is potentially being canceled or mitigated by poor reviews, is that something that all authors should try to have foresight for without compromising uh, their values or their goals? How do you
Uh,
think?
yeah, I mean, I think that I think anytime where a lot of the marketing that gets done for these books is done via social media. Once something's out there, it's out there, and it's probably not going to disappear. So I don't think that I don't think I'd advocate for anyone to um, you know stop speaking their minds, and just acquiesce to what they think the masses want to hear. But at the same time, I think that everyone would probably be wise to. We are writers. We should be able to pick and choose our words so that we can express ourselves in a way that makes our feelings and thoughts clear, while without at the same time alienating you know or insulting other people. If there's one thing that if there's one superpower that we share, it's the ability to use words in the best way possible, so we can express ourselves, and ideally at the same time without without insulting other people. So I think that we should all be careful to do just that.
Absolutely. And my biggest question for you, as somebody that is a driving force in the indie community, has to be, where do you see the indie market going in the future? How do you think it'll change? And what dynamics will there be with a more virtual presence existing?
So I think that I don't see a ton of change. I think that if anything, I see the indie market expanding. I think with the advent of these, or not the advent, but with the popularization of these these groups on Facebook, um, I think, and the ability for people to talk to each other more and share their experiences more frequently, I think you're gonna start seeing these vanity presses that have long since taken advantage of indie authors. You're gonna start seeing them disappear, because someone's going, an author gets approached by a vanity press, and they go into a group and say, hey, what do you guys think of XYZ publishing? And then 1,000 people will all say no, run for the hills. That's not a real publisher. They're a vanity press. You're never gonna make your money back. So I think there's gonna be a big benefit that we're gonna see those guys go away, or at least be marginalized, to where they're not affecting or damaging too many well-meaning indie authors. I think that these online communities will help educate a lot more people to understand the industry they're getting into, so they make wise investments. And but I think that we should still see this industry grow. I mean, my own group, I have seen the books that people have been promoting and putting out there. They've improved dramatically. Years ago when I first started the group, the books that were posted in there really weren't that great, and most of them were not books that people would have bought. Now I'm seeing some really good books, and I'm seeing some really high quality talent being showcased. So I think it's all all signs are pointing to things just getting better for indie authors.
That's really promising, and primarily because we're heading towards an age where people become their own businesses and represent themselves as almost a product in the employment world. Uh, you see people get losing jobs or getting jobs based on their beliefs or stances or uh, affiliations, and this is becoming more mainstream with children's books to get the affiliations of the big businesses. How is it that you go about doing that? And why are you so successful at it, but others, for the most part, aren't?
Can you give me an example of what you mean by affiliations with big businesses?
Uh, you're in just about every major bookstore.
Oh, okay. So, I think that part of it, and I'm going to answer this, and I actually do have to run. Unfortunately, I just looked at the time, and I'm going to go help take care of my son a little bit. But with I have taken the time to put a good quality product out there. There's one thing I'm confident about is that the books are well written. I only work with very highly skilled illustrators who can put out beautiful imagery that absolutely can compete with any other books that are out there on the shelves. And I find a lot of one big misstep that a lot of authors have is that they will they'll skimp on the illustrations because they want to save money, and that's not a place to skimp on. I do make sure that I print with very high quality printers. Um, I print with very high quality printers. I make sure that I use high quality paper. I use high quality binding and board stock for the covers. So the quality is there. I didn't go into this saying I want my books to be on Barnes and Noble. That's a goal for later. It took me, because I get people coming to me all the time saying, being on the shelves in Barnes and Noble is a dream. How do I do it? Well, that's like me going up to Derek Jeter and say, hey, how do I play shortstop for the Yankees? Um, it's a very small percentage of people that will ever end up on those shelves. And if you're going to come out swinging for the fences like that, you're probably not going to do it. It's not going to happen on your first turnout, especially if you're an indie author. I had to sell a ridiculous amount of Rickies, show that the book can sell on Amazon and other means, um, parlay those profits into more titles and to marketing strategies until I was finally able to convince a distributor who has a sales team that look, I'm the real deal. I'm going to continue to expand my portfolio by X number of books per year. I'm going to have X amount of dollars into in a marketing budget. Here's a marketing strategy where they finally decided to take me on as one of maybe 100 publishers they represent out of the tens of thousands that want them to. And they were able to bring me to Barnes and Noble. Um, and Barnes Noble was able to pick me out of whatever 100 or so different books they had access to. So it's a you have to play the long game if you want to get on into Barnes Nobles and the Targets, and you also have to recognize that if they put an order in for 15-20,000 books, you need to invest that money now into a large amount of money into books that are printed now for an order that may end up getting canceled, or books getting returned, or even if they do get actually on the shelves, you're not going to see that cash for 6 to 7 months. So that's it's a great opportunity, but you have to be able to deal with the risk of what that entails as well.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate your time today. The responses have been golden. I hope it helps people understand uh, the environment that you're in and how to maximize your potential. And also, I'm going to put in the link, a couple of links to your Facebook group and also your website. I'm so happy to have you here for this hour. And this is BC Simon with Meet Your Children's Author. Thank you for having for coming on today, Jay.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
All right, awesome.